young women in academia. Right. In 2024, she founded the Dr. Lena Foundation, an initiative dedicated to providing financial and educational support to South African students from underprivileged areas, that is enabling them to pursue higher education qualifications. Notably, when assuming her role as Vice Chancellor in 2018, she donated 20% of her monthly salary and 100% of proceeds from her public speaking and engagements to scholarship funds administered by UCT. We thank you for that. Following her early retirement, she was appointed by the President of the Republic of South Africa to serve as the Presidential Board, to serve on the Presidential Advisory Council on National Orders. And currently, Prof is a businesswoman with diverse interests spanning media, agriculture, and consulting, particularly in the education sector. She is a member of the advisory board, She is a member of the advisory board of the German University of Digital Science and a member of the President's Council of the University of the People. Colleagues, please allow me to welcome Prof Phakeng, and let's give her a grand
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Can I ask ICT? I don't know what you did to my computer. I can't get it started. So I'm gonna ask you to leave it the way I had left it, so that I can do this. No, but that's just power. Okay. This is just power. This there. Okay, it was there before.
Let's see.
Check the input terminal. Are you saying the power is disturbing your laptop, your connection?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
But it didn't before.
Okay, let's try it again.
Okay, I was about to say Wits needs an upgrade.
It does.
Colleagues, good morning. Just to let you know that I'm going live on YouTube. I can do this. I'm not an academic anymore. It's important that audiences beyond this room get to hear the lecture today. Also forgive me, I had an eye operation like, a month ago. And my eyesight got affected, so I can see close, but I can't actually see you out there. So if you are smiling with me and I'm not smiling back, it's because I see you blurry. It will get fixed. I've got an appointment with my ophthalmologist to fix it. So forgive me if I'm avoiding making eye contact, because people make eye contact and then I can't see them. And then it doesn't look good. All right, we can go without the power, if that's what it will take here on this side of the country. Are you good? No, but you've locked my laptop. Okay, it's fine. Let's see if I can. No, it's not opening. Whatever you did, you locked my laptop.
I think we must just maybe swap the laptops after this.
No, we can't.
Let's see. Yeah.
But by the way, I've been here waiting, right? And I thought I'm set up. If we were to swap laptops, we should have done it whilst I'm sitting here waiting since 8:45. So sorry about that, but this is an ordinary laptop.
It was working.
Yeah, it was working, but just to be clear to the audience that it is not the visitor who's creating the problem. What do we do now?
Okay, let me me put it on a stick or put it on
There's no stick to put. This is 2025, ladies and gentlemen. There's no USB, whatever, yeah. It's 2029. Guy, there's no USB, what here.
Yeah, we've got.
Okay, it's not there.
We've got
Oh,
USBs.
okay, let's do that then. And of course it might mess up everything, but what can we do? We are at Wits, right? I don't know what's happened here. It honestly has got my whole, this thing gets, I think the problem is this maybe.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interference. Okay, it's this one there.
You know that the layout may go haywire, right?
Yes.
You want to click on email.
No. On a stick. We've got a stick here.
Alright, let's see, maybe do.
Oh, she has other. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, this one is working. Okay, thank you.
Are you on?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
All right. Finally, we are on. Colleagues, good morning. And thank you very much for this invitation. It's good to see colleagues when I can see them. And after this talk, I hope I'll be able to connect with some of you at a closer range when I'll be able to see you. My talk this morning is entitled Language, Power, Access, Reimagining Mathematics Education in Multilingual Contexts. The key argument that I want to make is that with language comes power. Power to conceptualize, to critique, to defend ideas, to name your world in words that come from your world. With power comes access. Access to knowledge production, to being heard, indeed, to institutional legitimacy. Language either opens that door or slams it on your face. In fact, language is power. Language is not a medium of instruction as some describe it. It is a medium of identity, a medium of belonging. It determines whose knowledge counts, whose reasoning persuades, whose voice is credible. Mathematics becomes part of this access equation when we realize that it is not just about numbers or figures or representations or whatever. Mathematics is logic, it's reasoning, communication. It's not enough to arrive at the answer what in mathematics. It is about understanding how and indeed why. And to understand why, learners must be able to think, speak, and argue mathematically in a language that lives inside of them. That is the language of logic. If that logic is foreign, that logic is weakened. And the effects of that is this long-standing false narrative that mathematics is hard. I argue that sometimes it is not that the learners cannot think logically. The issue is that the language through which they are expected to express that logic is unfamiliar. It is limiting and cognitively challenging. We must remember, mathematics itself is a gatekeeper subject. it opens doors to science, engineering, economics, technology, and almost everything. In fact, even to some respect. So when we deny learners the opportunity to learn mathematics in their home language, we are making it harder, and we are effectively denying them the power and access. We are excluding them epistemically. We are telling them that rigor and excellence are foreign. We are telling them that their own cognitive assets are inadequate for higher order thinking. We are demanding that they reason in a voice that does not belong to them. And I hear some of you sitting there perhaps saying, but English is the language of power globally. Yes, it is, and we'll get to that. But who decided that? Who benefits from the hegemony of English? And more importantly, must we always climb someone else's ladder just to reach our own ceiling? Can we build ladders that start where we stand? Well, here's one leader that we all agree across the world that he deserves the honor that we give them. And he said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. But what happens when we ask our children to learn mathematics in a language that reaches neither their head nor their heart? Let's just look at the multilingual context of South Africa right now, and we look at the recent policy developments as well. We currently have 12 official languages. Policy allows schools to choose the language of learning and teaching. In theory, this supports linguistic equity, but in practice, it actually reproduces inequality. Most learners study mathematics in English, which is not their home language, leading to barriers in conceptual understanding and mathematical communication. The curriculum emphasizes mathematics communication, but honestly, how do you build an argument in a language that you barely think in? How do you explore abstract logic when you still are trying to grasp the literal meaning of the questions? The system demands cognitive rigor in a language learners are still decoding. It then punishes them when they fail to meet the standards set by that same language. We then treat their failure as an issue of intellect and not of policy or implementation of policy. Bagaetso, mathematics is very easy, and I'm being deliberately provocative by saying mathematics is easy. And I stopped saying our learners are failing mathematics. The truth is that the mathematics is failing them through the language it is forced to wear. But there are recent policy developments. Starting 2025, mother tongue-based bilingual education, as they call it, MTBE, model has been introduced from grade 4, a move described as transformational for improving access and comprehension in subjects like mathematics. There is a growing focus on leveraging learners' diverse linguistic and cultural backgrounds as cognitive assets, developing teaching models that draw on all learners' languages to improve mathematical literacy and engagement. As much as it sounds revolutionary though, I must add that implementation is where many revolutions go to die. Beyond implementation will it get acceptance, even from those who it benefits, who it's meant to benefit. But maybe let me pause here, because otherwise this sounds like a sad story. By the way, these recent policy shifts did not just happen. They are a result of our work. And let me acknowledge Jill Adler. I know she's in the audience. I can't see her. But also the many people, Jill for the pioneering work, who supervised me, and many other people, and the people who I worked with in the language and mathematics teaching and learning, or multilingualism in mathematics. We've done this work And I can remember in 2015 at the mathematics education in Durban, making an argument for a multilingual approach to mathematics teaching and learning. They will not tell you, News 24 will not tell you, but this is the work. This is the result of the research work that some of us did over the years. If you want to see the journey of the research, I invite you to go to mamokgethi.com. It's a little bit outdated, but it gives you the story of the journey of my research, and you can see how the work unfolded, because I chose not to do that today. Because I want to focus on how we are doing in this journey with these recent policy shifts that are described as transformational. They are meant to be revolutionary. But in fact, as I say, implementation is where many revolutions go to die. And maybe it's important that this critique comes now, because the implementation started this year. So let's look at the implementation of this MTBE in former Model C schools. Many former Model C schools, of course, are continuing business as usual, predominantly teaching in English or Afrikaans, with African languages marginalized or only taught as additional or conversational subjects. The move away from exclusively English as the language of learning and teaching in these schools has been very limited, due in part to parental expectations, demographic makeup, and resource availability. By the way, these schools are not white schools, they're just former Model C schools. Most of them are largely 100% black, actually. So when I say parental expectations, don't think I'm talking about white parents' expectations. And that's why, in my last slide, I said to you, sometimes these policy shifts are rejected by the very people who are supposed to benefit. Of course, these schools are not resisting multilingualism because it is unworkable. No, they resist it because it threatens power. English is viewed as a credential more than as a language. So you challenge. If anything comes in that looks as a challenge to that power, then it gets rejected, even by the people whose the change is meant to benefit. So multilingualism is then viewed by these schools, or in these schools, as a dilution of standards and not as a deepening of learning. Is there something I'm doing that's wrong? Oh, you can't see.
Yeah, we just want
No,
to
but you can just listen, man. Please, 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 please. Because it's too late. Unfortunately, you are in this part of the country. I tried, guys. I tried. So you can't blame me. I'm sorry. But as you can see, man, I'm a bit of a rebel. I don't like being controlled in that way. I like you being organized. And that's why not everybody likes me. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I've accepted that. It's too late. In about 400 days, I'll be 60. So you don't like me? Tough. It's done. So let me continue with the lecture. So multilingualism in these schools is viewed as a dilution of standards and not as a deepening of learning. Let's go on with the implementation and see how is it working in township schools. And then we'll ask, what are the implications of what's going on? In township schools, learners receive instruction in their home language at foundation phase from grade R to 3, at least on paper, that's what we're told. From grade 4 to 7, home language is combined progressively with English, with the bilingual assessment weighing gradually shifting from mostly mother tongue, 80% in grade 4, towards an equal split by grade 7, a 50-50 split, mother tongue to English. The aim is to improve comprehension. This is the reason why these policy shifts were introduced. The aim is to improve comprehension, engagement, and learning outcomes by building on learners' first languages while incrementally strengthening their English proficiency. Of course, conversations with people, policymakers in the DBE in different provinces indicate that there continues to be shuffles in the department, in the government. But why do we have this discrepancy in implementation in Model C schools, former Model C schools, and township schools? We have this discrepancy because language is political, and it has always been political. Around the world, language has always been used as a tool of power. You conquer a people, and the first thing you do is disrupt their tongue. That's what you do in politics. You replace it with your tongue, not just to communicate, but to control how they think, to control what they value, and who they believe themselves to be. That's why language is contested. You see, during slavery, the first thing taken from the enslaved was their language. Africans in the US were deliberately separated by linguistic groups so they could not organize. You should read the history of slavery and look at how they were organized. They came from different language groups from West Africa, shipped to the US, and then they were grouped into their language groups so that they're separated by linguistic groups so that they can't organize. In the same way, colonialism followed the same logic, just with more classrooms and fewer chains. There were no chains, and there were more classrooms. But the theory was the same. People were actively taught to abandon their languages for the language of the colonizer. In South Africa, a language was central to the ideology of apartheid. It was used to classify, to segregate, and polarize South Africans. I mean, even today, those linguistic polarizations exist. Today, you'll be surprised that apartheid ended whenever. But they still exist today. Language was also used to control and contain. But let's continue with the implications of this discrepancy, because now we understand why are we here? Well, the implications of this discrepancy in the implementation of the recent policy developments is that learners in former Model C schools actually may benefit from dominant language instruction, but at the cost of losing exposure to African languages and cultural inclusivity, and possibly missing cognitive and identity benefits linked to multilingualism. And then township schools, learners in township schools risk poor foundational learning if home language instruction is inadequately supported, and it's often inadequately supported, with teachers frequently compelled to revert to English prematurely, undermining comprehension and academic success. But this discrepancy also unwittingly gives a message that parents with money can buy their children out of gaining fluency in an African language. They can just, you don't want this black stuff, which is the language, you can buy your children out to a former Model C school. A message that to succeed is to unlearn your identity. The discrepancy also perpetuates the flawed message of English as a marker of affluence and intelligence. So there are serious consequences for this discrepancy. But then, of course, as researchers and scholars, we can't just sit there and say, okay, the policymakers tried, and this is where we are, so let's just take it. We've got to explore, what then? How then can we address this? And in my view, a possible solution to address this is what I proposed as the multilingual approach to mathematics teaching and learning. I have a feeling that the policymakers heard me, but they didn't hear me fully. The minister was there when I presented the argument. It was Angie Motsekga at that time. But I don't think they heard me adequately. But of course, I mean, they could have called me as they build in this policy thing, and then I can break it down. But we are here, and they'll never call me. So maybe they'll call you. So let me break it down now. Possible solutions. My view is that we must build a mathematics education system that allows learners to think, speak, and reason mathematically in the language they understand best. That means teaching and learning must happen through more than one language, deliberately and systematically. So, we have to change the current messaging of the policy, or the current policy messaging. The policy messaging should go something like, South Africa is a multilingual context with a multilingual policy, and therefore it demands multilingual practice, period. That's what the messaging should be. And then from there we can move on. We can say, why? Because understanding precedes performance. A multilingual approach to teaching and learning allows learners to ask questions, express doubts, and engage in mathematical reasoning using the language that comes naturally to them. And I'll break it down exactly in terms of implement, what does this look like? A multilingual approach means we must give explanations, vocabulary, and have discussions in both the language of teaching and learning, or I can even say the language of the hegemony and the learner's home languages. And this, colleagues, cannot be rocket science in the digital age we find ourselves in. Surely, it cannot be. But it also means we must start valuing translanguaging as a necessary learning practice, rather than something to be disciplined out of our learners. I continue with the solution as a multilingual approach to mathematics teaching and learning. We need to change how we view the teacher. A teacher in a multilingual context is not one who can repeat content in two languages, but is one who can listen in one language, explain in another, and clarify through both. It also means every teacher must acquire fluency in at least one indigenous African language. And this is not a tough ask. There are countries in this world who do it. There are cities who do it. You want to teach at the University of Ottawa? You've got to be, well, it's advantageous if you are fluent in French and English. In fact, you get paid a little more if you are fluent in both. Why? Because you are more useful. You teach both the French classes and the English classes, and when you are in the French or English class, you can move between the two languages. This also means changing how we publish. Monolingual textbooks and assessments are part of the problem. They send the message that English is the only real language of mathematics. But it's interesting. When we have Afrikaans as a language of learning and teaching, we actually recognize the fact that the African-speaking people who learn in Afrikaans also have fluency in English. In fact, they recognize the hegemony of English. They are not rejecting it. They recognize it. And the Afrikaans, the papers, metric papers, mathematics papers for Afrikaans learners have got English and Afrikaans. Nobody says, just give it to them in Afrikaans only. They're in both. That's why, in my research, we did an experiment of doing all, not just the question papers, but all text, all tasks, written tasks in both languages, in one language of the learner and English. And I'm arguing that we must change how we publish. In fact, in a multilingual context like ours, having a monolingual textbook should not happen. We should normalize publishing books that are written in 2 languages. It doesn't have to be all 11 languages. English and another language. English and Chivenda, English and Setswana, English and Sepedi, and then the child can choose which one they buy. You recognize the hegemony of English, but you recognize that you want them to have access, which gives them power. Then you bring their home language. A multilingual approach requires all mathematics materials to be published in English and at least one other indigenous language. And as I said, colleagues, this cannot be rocket science or even cost the country's GDP in this digital age. Most importantly, a multilingual approach changes the learner's relationship with mathematics. Right now, many learners see mathematics as a foreign language because they even get to before they even get to the numbers, I mean, they've got to deal with this language. A multilingual approach tells them that they can identify with mathematics too when they see their language in a grade 11 mathematics textbook. They realize we too are legit. In fact, there's nothing wrong in being Chivenda or a Motswana. Here's the textbook. Also has got some things written in it. Even if the language of learning and teaching in the school is English, you want that language, the learner's home language, as part of the book that's published. So we are working on changing it will change the learner's relationship to mathematics. A multilingual approach tells the learners that they can identify with mathematics too. They can critique it, they can dream about it. It then allows us to judge mathematical ability based on thinking and not on fluency in a colonial language. At the moment, our assessment of mathematical ability is an assessment of fluency in the colonial language. But there are even bigger advantages for a multilingual approach to mathematics teaching. I hope you are hearing me, that I'm saying the recent policy developments are not helpful. In fact, what they've created is a 2-class system. You can buy your children out of this MTBE if you are at a former Model C school. And by the way, I'm ignoring private schools because they are privately owned and so on and so on. But if this thing takes off at former Model C schools, it's a matter of time before private schools take it. In fact, some clever private school owners, I mean, I would be surprised if none of them would not take this up if it takes off. A multilingual approach to mathematics teaching and learning recognizes and acknowledges that not all languages are equally powerful. I'm not a politician who says, throw away the English. No, you can't. You're not going to win. So this approach says, there's the hegemony of English. Not all languages are equally powerful. English is more powerful than the others. But multilingualism is not a disadvantage. So how can we draw on it to make sure that our children succeed? And in fact, their identity is also includes mathematics. The multilingual approach recognizes also that multilingualism is not a disadvantage, but also that a multilingual is not a sum of 2 or more complete or incomplete monolinguals. You know, there are people who think I tell them I'm learning, I speak 9 languages. By the way, I'm learning French. So that's why it came first, I'm learning. But I speak 9 languages, and I can read them. And people think my English should be at the level of a fluency of a first language. No, it shouldn't be. I'm a multilingual. So a multilingual is not a sum of 2 monolinguals. And this multilingual approach to mathematics teaching and learning should recognize that and therefore the coexistence of a constant interaction of the many languages in a multilingual person. like myself and many of you. There's a constant interaction. That's why when we talk as Black people, even when you think we are just speaking Setswana, we may be mixing it with Zulu or Venda or even Afrikaans if you come from Pretoria like myself. Because you are multilingual. So in our everyday conversations, because there's this constant interaction of the many languages in a multilingual person, which produces a different but complete language system. So it's important that we don't see multilinguals as a combination of monolinguals. A multilingual approach is important, and we must adopt it because it creates an environment in which learners can engage in high cognitive level demands, drawing on the variety of languages present. Our research shows that when children are limited only to English, and their fluency is what it is in many schools, even in formal overseas schools, they can engage in high cognitive demand tasks. But how can this practically be done if teachers are monolingual and we have all these things that we have? Well, focus on getting all teachers fluent in one indigenous African language. Each school must select their African language of focus. I don't know why we haven't done this. You know, during apartheid, Afrikaans was compulsory, not only compulsory, everyone who was training to be a teacher had to learn Afrikaans. Ek kan no praat still. I haven't lost anything. Actually, I've become stronger. So schools should choose a language of focus, policy, but implementation, but I want to break it down because these things are going to support a multilingual approach, even in Model C schools. Make it a core part of the school's identity. Make this language that they have chosen a core part of the school's identity. Make it visible. Offer it as a subject at first language level, not for conversational purposes like many Model C schools are doing. Include it on posters around schools. Celebrate it and build institutional pride around it. I mean, it would be great to have parents, African parents, arguing and lobbying to have an African language be adopted. They are not saying push out English, they're saying we want English. It's the language of learning and teaching, but you must teach an African language at first language level. And then we get textbooks published in 2 languages. Learners have this support on their desk. A staff member who's fluent in both English and a South African indigenous language is more useful to the school and the country than one who is not. And they've got to be valued. And I like what the city of Ottawa does with people who know more than one language. They get rewarded for it because they are more useful. The district must offer lessons to teachers for free. In fact, universities must start saying you can't graduate to be a teacher if you don't know one African language. I mean, sorry to do this, but UCT does do that. You can't graduate to be a medical doctor or a social worker or a teacher if you're not fluent in isiXhosa or another African language at UCT. You can pass everything. It doesn't matter whether you come from Mauritius, from Bangkok, from England. You are doing an MBCHP at UCT. If you don't pass isiXhosa 1, you just simply don't graduate. So it is with a teacher and a social worker. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But you've got to do this. We need leadership that will push these things, even though they annoy people. So it's not only at the school, but the district for teachers who are already in service. You get the district to offer lessons for free. And in my view, achieving these things is doable. It's doable in the short term. And of course, there will be other benefits. There will be other benefits. And this will not only serve to enable teaching and learning in our schools, irrespective of their location, but it will also serve to preserve African languages and African pride, which in my view, we need. But actually, it will bring it together. It will bring us together as people. I mean, one of the reasons why we are so polarized is because actually, the poorer you are, the more African languages you speak. The more affluent you are, the less indigenous South African languages you speak. Actually, if you're really at the top, you speak none of them. You just speak English with a twang. And then you get respect. So we are busy, and we are scholars, guys. We are the scholars. And I'm saying this is important for mathematics teaching and learning, and I hope I gave you reason for that. But it's also important for our society. I had a diagram because I developed a framework that's not just for mathematics education, but for why it is important to preserve languages. But I'm not going to put it, I mean, we can't put it up. We are at Wits, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. So I'm going to pause here and take questions. Thank you very much. If there are no questions, I'm happy to sit down. You are probably angry wanting to toy. You know, the nice thing about taking early retirement and working for yourself is that I don't have to account to anybody. These are my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. If they're uncomfortable in this space, tough. Any questions?
Colleagues, because of time, we have up to 10, so we do have a good 20 minutes. We'll take it in bits and bits, right? Can we start with 3? I'm not doing somehow, but I think I see Prof's end up. Prof, okay. Right. Did you want to go, Prof? Okay, I'm noting yours first. 1, and then 2, Prof. And then 3. Then we'll go to the next round afterwards.
Thank you. Mamokgethi is Lunetta. You probably can't see me, but
I see you. I see very close, not so.
Yeah, I'm sure we all do. So much pray to God that your sight will be revived and you'll be able to see us again at a distance. These are wonderful conversations that those of us that were here during that time together, these were the same arguments that you were pushing at that time. And they are still very strong and they're still very passionate about it, which to a good degree really makes us very proud of you. The question that I would like to ask is, you and I are scientists, and whatever we talk about and try to publish, we would like to see it being recognized by our own governments. Now this comes to the developments of textbooks, where you say very well so that it's important that an English physics textbook, for instance, should also be translated and well written, say in Sisulu, and the teacher has access.
Not translated. I'm talking about textbook published in more than one language. School textbook.
Yes.
So I'm not calling for publication of mathematics textbooks in Africa, in Setswana or Tshivenda. I'm saying English and Tshivenda.
Yes.
In one textbook.
Yes.
That's a multilingual approach.
Right. So that would mean it's the same textbooks, but it has two versions of it.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, the point I'm trying to drive is, you and I would like to see that work recognized by the State Department of Higher Education and Training. But it definitely doesn't get recognized.
Well, I think it is. I mean, I think the recent policy developments actually have happened because of the work that we did here, the work that I think at Wits University did. So it's a slow change.
Yeah.
But of course, as I was saying, it's for those of you, I mean, some of us are cancelled, right? But you who are not cancelled, you must, that's why I'm here, so that you can tell them.
So if we, for instance, if I did that, a physics book or a mathematics book and produced and went to my research unit at the university, they'll say, no, this is a textbook. It carries no units, it's not a scientific
I'm not asking you to publish it. University academics normally don't publish school textbooks. I mean, Paul Laridan was a special breed,
Yeah.
and Jackie Scheiber and whatever, the people who did classroom maths. And I'm saying it's a message that we just say this is useful. This is what will work. As scholars, we don't have to, I don't want to publish a school textbook. But if the policy says textbooks have to be bilingual, then publishers will go with it.
Yeah, but that's where I'm coming from. That as scholars, I think we should go beyond that. We should now begin to think about us being involved in the actual publications of this knowledge. That's my argument.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is Zeynep from Ethiopia. Prof, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate your emotion, your energy at your age. That's highly impressive. So I have 3 points. One reflection and 2 questions. One is, do you really think that there is multilingualism context in many schools in many countries in Africa? So I have 2 cases. I endorse Professor Tony Esen's argument that there are multiple monolingualisms. So another case is I have the chance to see a dictionary in mathematics education here in South Africa, which is published in different versions in columns, one language. So a term is one language, another language. So in parallel, in columns. So is it really existing? The question then is, how can a monolingual teacher support or facilitate or promote multilingualism? So if I could not speak the language of some students, how could I support them? How could I guide them? And the last question is, what is the implication of your speech for inclusive Africa? So multi-language, I'm not saying multilingualism, multi-language is a reality of different countries in Africa, including Ethiopia, Ghana, Nigeria, and so on, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm so glad to meet you, Prof.
Give me your name.
I read a lot of your articles when I was writing my thesis about code switching and language in mathematics. Thank you so much. You brought a point here about...
My name, your name?
My name is Mamokgethi Phakeng. I would like to ask a question. You brought a point about the Department of Basic Education. And I got a question. It says, what is your take with what is happening currently in the DBE of promoting quantity as compared to quality in terms of advocating mathematical literacy instead of using mathematics, which is one of the gatekeeping subjects which promotes economics and sciences. If a learner is having mathematics, it can open doors for the learner. So what is your take in terms of the DBE promoting maths instead of maths, which is very, very important in this scenario? Thank you.
Righty, thank you, colleagues. We'll pause and let Prof respond to the 3 questions, and then we'll go to the next round. Prof?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start with your question, Malva. I mean, I think last year I published, given my identity at the moment, now, which I really like, I published a few things. I do recordings on whatever, on my views on maths literacy. I actually think maths literacy is important. I actually think so. Not to replace mathematics. Not to replace mathematics, but it's important because it's important to be quantitatively literate, whether you studied mathematics or whatever. It's important. So I don't subscribe to the knee-jerk reaction of kill the subject. In fact, I want to overhaul life orientation before I go to maths literacy. Maths literacy is hugely important, mainly. So I just to put that on record, and if you go to my Instagram, you'll find many recordings where I talk about this stuff. I don't know how the DBE is doing that, moving children from pure maths to maths literacy. I always thought it's the schools, not DBE. I didn't think the DBE dictates to the schools to move children from maths to maths literacy. As a parent who's also had children at school, I do know that schools, when at grade 10 or so, they decide if you are getting this much, then they don't want you to continue with mathematics. They want you to continue to mathematical literacy because they want to look good in the matric results. So I think we are backing at the wrong tree. And I know that my son, his school when he was at high school, wanted him to not do mathematics. And I screamed a fuss. And of course he didn't get an A. But not everybody has got to get an A in maths. It's nonsense. But he's doing a PhD in economics and he's an AI specialist. He's doing extremely well. But had I not screamed a fuss at that school or cowed that he's not going to, I was sure, it was clear he wasn't going to get an A. But who said you must all get A's? It's nonsense. But I mean, schools are there to be challenged. But unfortunately, if parents don't challenge that, then the schools will move them. But also, if you're challenging the school to move your child to maths, then you also must come to the party and do stuff. Make sure that your child, even if they don't get an A, they pass and they can do something, and they can be as boastful as I am today. Okay? So I'm just saying. Okay. So I haven't seen a policy document for DBE, but please, Mahobe, educate me after this if you have it. Maybe whilst I'm busy at the farm driving tractors, there's other things that are published that I don't see. Okay, so please educate me if there's an instruction from the department that says schools must move children, that moves children from maths to maths literacy. Okay. Zizine, you said, from Ethiopia. Your questions are on point, right? First, let me say, the multilingual contexts are not just the multilingual contexts. I could have presented this lecture anywhere on the continent. In fact, it's about time the African Union invites me to come and talk to their education, whatever. We are not going to have an Africa for all in 2065 if we don't take the things that I'm talking about seriously. Because what I'm talking about, actually, is that language, access, power. It's something. It's a mess. It's something. This applies to all the countries. I chose to focus on South Africa because South Africa has got these recent policy developments, and these recent policy developments are not gaining the traction that they thought they would. But I just think they are not thought through carefully. You don't just pounce this policy change like this and think that people are just going to accept teaching in an African language when it is seen as holding children back from progress. So yes, these implications of this of my work go beyond South Africa to all African countries. Of course, I'm not sure about Ethiopia with Amharic and so on, and that's the context that I wouldn't talk confidently about because it didn't experience colonialism as we did. Okay, so it may be a different conversation, but definitely for most of Africa, this conversation holds. How can a monolingual teacher support multilingualism? I think there's in the short term, the big prize is that if you are really a caring multilingual, a good multilingual teacher in a multilingual country, for goodness sake, learn the other language. That just gets me worked up. What do you want in this environment. It's a multilingual environment. At least learn. I understand if you say I'm serious. I'm operating in an international world. And so I decided I'm going to learn French. Because it's my problem. You are operating in multilingual context. Learn at least one African language. Don't wait for anybody to push you. By the way, some countries choose to teach the languages of the other people for political reasons, because it gives them power. Their soldiers will hear when the other people are, their spies will hear when the things are happening in another language. Just check. I don't want to be controversial. Just check who in the world is teaching Arabic. Which countries have taken decisions to teach Arabic as a language, and ask yourself why. Probably there are more schools teaching Arabic in Israel than you have in other Arabic countries. It's power. And all I'm saying is, Africa, wake up! And I'm saying, if you're a multilingual teacher, and you don't have an African language in your repertoire of languages, actually, it is advantageous for you to learn an African language without any pressure from anybody, simply because you are a caring teacher. Even if there's no policy like this or not. Well, whilst you are still learning, like I'm still learning French and I'm not fluent, in the office that I have here in Joburg, there's a lot of people who speak French. Every day, I go and hold a little conversation with them, because I want my French to get better. Okay? And when they speak in French, I ask them, can you explain to me what you've just said? Because I want to. They haven't demanded that I learn French. I don't need to, according to them. But I'm learning, because I understand the power that comes with language. And I think if you're a teacher in a multilingual context, for me, it's just as simple as that. My context requires, well, in my view, it will be advantageous for me to understand French. It will give me power if I understand French. And so I am learning French. So I hope it answers your question. You want to take another round? Or should I?
Yes, one last one. Thank you, Prof. So can you please make sure, please, that you think carefully about your questions in terms of whether they've been covered or not. And whilst we do that, can I just say that I'm going to take just the last round now. And of the three, please make sure as you speak that you introduce yourself and say the name of the institution you come from. Right. Good. We have four. And I'll take the four and then we close it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, end of story. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Multilingual from Wits University. I'm a third year student here. So my question is, but before I go to my question, I think Ms. or Dr. Zongile, you forgot a very powerful statement that she's the first black or rather South African to obtain a PhD in mathematics. I think we also have to say that.
Before people say I'm lying and start saying things, mathematics education, a black African, South African woman.
Woman, yes. Thank you very much.
Because they will say it's me who's lying. News 24 and the Maverick.
So I think we need to add that. And then my question is that in Gauteng specifically, we have schools where we have, in one class, we have groups where some learners speak Venda, Zulu, Spedi, and all of those languages in one class. So the question is that how are we going to implement this multilingual approach in that class? Right? I do understand that you were proposing that schools should stick to at least one South African native language, right? which is, I think, can happen because some question papers are written in English and Afrikaans. Why can they write it in English and Sepedi? It can happen. It can happen. But how can you implement that multilingual approach in that textbook? Thank you very much.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Kate Silva. I'm from Wits. I'm currently pursuing my PhD. Thank you so much, Prof, for your thought-provoking presentation. It was so informative. And I'm also in men's education in languages. But now, I like how you were talking about the mother tongue-based bilingual education as a way of, or an approach that looks into translanguaging itself, and it advocates for translanguaging as such. So for me, as you were talking about the fluency, the importance of how teachers should develop fluency in any of, when you talk of fluency, I think of it as it stands for basic interpersonal communication skills. So when you talk of fluency, my thing is, are we promoting fluency as opposed to proficiency really? Because I'm thinking back to the GDE survey that was presented through advocating for this mother tongue-based bilingual education policy, that they were talking about how teachers can be Betty, but if the GDE comes to me and asks me, you are Betty, Miss Sohoa, yes, but are you able to teach mathematics in Betty? Remains the question. So does the fluency really equate to being proficient, to being able to teach mathematics in the home language that I'm proficient or fluent in? Thank you.
Good day, colleagues. Good day, Prof. My name is Moses, and I'm a student here at the School of Education. No problem, sir. So, Prof, love your work, and I love, the lecture was good and all that, but I think my question is...
God.
No.
Go ahead.
No.
I can take it.
No.
I'm taking big applause, man.
So, I think, you make an argument about how the hegemony of English, right? And I think your work speaks, as you're talking, I'm hearing a lot of, I can relate to other writers, people like Achille Mbembe, who speak about, the importance of our languages and so on. But I think in the South African context, being a South African national myself, we're at a disadvantage because, I go to a school, I get taught in Setswana perhaps, which is probably my mother tongue from grade 1 until matric, right? And then I do English as well. Then I come to Wits University. And then when I'm here to do a B.Ed, they say to me, okay, because you have this Setswana on your matric certificate, you're exempted from continuing with, studies in African languages here, right? So therefore, 10 years down the line, I lose my fluency, in terms of reading. You see, I can speak it, it's okay, but then, the cycle continues. The other learners in the schooling system continue with their Sizulu, Chipende, and so on. That they'll do the African language, and then after X amount of years, after graduating high school, not engaging with the language, we just speak it when we meet our fellow mates or back where we come from, in the villages, wherever we're from, So if that cycle continues, then how then will that progress to what you're proposing, We'll always face similar issues that English will always be prioritized, but then, the African languages are put aside.
Who's the fourth person?
Good morning, Prof. Zwelitin Kamini, one of his former students here.
I can't see you, Zoe. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the wonderful talk, and you remind me of your lectures when you once taught us the issues of language. And just to be short and brief, on the talk, there's one thing that resonates from my mind as you were talking to say DBE has started the issues of language in grade 4 to teach, maybe say it's multilingual or in the home language. But my take is what about the institutions of higher learning, the universities? Because if the universities are not responsive to what DBE is doing, then the issues of implementation that we're talking about is going to be a challenge. When are we, or the system, going to produce teachers who can do exactly what you are saying in terms of the language, so that they can teach in both or 3 languages in the same class? And then the last part will be, if DBE has started the implementation, there's this one word which you'll remind me from your lectures, which says English is well developed in teaching mathematics. And what about the African languages? When are they going to get developed? We know Africans took almost 30 years to be developed, from the 50s to the 70s. But now, if we start now with the African languages, when is it going to be developed? Is it dialect or what? Will remind me. When is it going to be developed in a sense that you can teach the mathematics in the African language? Because if you look at the African language, mainly the mathematics is better off in understanding in the African language than the English. Because if you say one and you say unye, ubili, utatu, it's more quantitative than in the English. Thank you.
Okay, I think we don't have time anymore, but I wanna ask. You know how I'm feeling, Tony? It's like I haven't given this lecture, and I haven't published anything. So nobody, all of these students have not read any of the work, because some of the stuff that you are saying, either you didn't get, you are not understanding my work, or didn't understand me today. Okay, so let me be clear. My argument is not that we're teaching an African language. I've said it many times, that it's not practicable. Politically, nobody's going to buy it. Actually, the reason why this policy is receiving on the ground resistance, even in township schools, is precisely when teachers see it as something that they just want to teach in African language. And to their defense, it's not because people are anti-African languages, it's because English is just too powerful. The reason why I'm advocating for a multilingual approach is that I'm saying you keep the English, then you introduce the African language. They go together. Even if the teacher can't speak an African language, the children have a textbook that's got both. Every test that they get has got both. Every exam they have has got both languages. I'm pausing a little bit so that it sinks in. Now, you're doing that because you recognize the hegemony of English. But you bring in the African language because not only will it serve for them to access the mathematics, but in terms of their identity and gaining access to power in the language they can think in. It gives them an in that way. That's why they might end up dreaming mathematics in their own languages. Now, I don't want you to misread that. Now, when I say maybe you haven't read my work, in my work, and Tony, you'll help here and perpetuate the work, please, please. I argue that when I say introduce African languages and so on, I'm not advocating for a purist view of language. So in fact, Malikutu, in my research work, when we tested the multilingual approach to mathematics teaching and learning, we worked with schools in Soweto, in the East Rand, and in Gabankuwa. And the situation that you are talking about, where in one class you have a multiplicity of languages, was there. And part of the research site was in Soweto precisely so that we can make it work even in that environment. And it's still easy. Luneta will have it in Chivenda in English, Mosa will have it in English and Setswana, someone will have it in English. So we organized students in language groups, so they were working in groups. They were working in groups, Chivenda groups, and some of them said, I'm Chivenda, but I don't want to be in the Chivenda group. I want to be in the Sotho group. Because we are fluent in many languages, those of us who grew up in the township, in Gauteng. And so what we found in our analysis was that when we interviewed the learners about how was the class, what did you learn, they engaged more with the mathematics, and they felt that they could make arguments, and we asked them why. Only when we push them why, they say, yeah, it's because it was I had the task in Zulu. But they also had the English version. They could flip without announcing to anybody that they don't understand anything. So, but how did the translation go? We didn't go for the purist model. We didn't stress about translating or finding a word for logarithm in Chivenda. We didn't argue about what is an equilateral triangle in Sepedi and should it sound like Setswana because these two languages are very close. Because our view is that that's not where the challenge necessarily was, not where the challenge. Because we recognize that obviously, of course, registers have to be developed, and that takes time. But what I'm saying is that you don't have to wait and say, we are waiting until we have the whole register and an agreement. Only then we go. No, I'm saying do it now. The words that are not yet there in the African language, you still insert logarithm in English. I mean, it's still under negotiation perhaps. It doesn't break anything. But as I said, all revolutions don't succeed. And sometimes, of course, it's at the table of implementation, but some of them at the table of self-sabotage. The very people are the people who don't want it, right? But of course, as long as the problem is not solved, you have something to fight about, and maybe that's what we want. And I'm saying you don't have to wait for that. In fact, I was giving a lecture at CUT. I was invited to talk because they were talking about preserving African languages. And in my proposal to them about what they need to do, I actually said, anyone who says, start teaching in an African language today, arguing that, you get many people who pretend to be revolutionaries. It's not going to happen. Those are delaying tactics. The first thing you need to do, if you want a multilingual approach to thrive, is to get people to learn the language. You first start with learning a language. You can learn about the language, and then you can teach in the language. That's the last step in my view. So this idea of people who pretend to be revolutionaries and say, universities must teach in isiZulu, they must teach in Setswana, otherwise, no. Just start your revolution by saying, every lecturer must learn at least one. And every student must learn at least one. It's small, but you are not starting there because you don't want the problem to be solved. Because your revolutionary speech will be destroyed. I'm being provocative deliberately. Now, Biggs and Culp. I talked loosely about let the people get fluency. And I'm not talking, I'm not talking about teaching in an African language. And actually, in our work on teaching and learning mathematics in multilingual classrooms, we argue that in many classrooms, I mean, certainly in my PhD, in classrooms where teachers were insisting on learners interacting only in English, there was so much interference of trying to correct the language. As long as you're obsessed with fluency and we are teaching mathematics. We are not teaching a language. The language teaching will happen in another class. Am I saying children don't develop fluency in English or in an African language in the mathematics class? Maybe they will, but that's not our focus, Ketso. Our focus is the mathematics. And so, if I'm communicating the mathematics and I'm mixing the languages and they make a grammar mistake, I don't care. I'm looking at the mathematical meaning. That's what you should be concerned about. You are a math. For me, and I do understand that sometimes these things come together. The language used, the tense and whatever can affect the mathematical meaning. I think we should focus on the mathematical meaning. Am I saying bigs and cup are not important? They're important. And that's why I say former Model C schools, oftentimes when they talk about African languages, they talk about conversational. It's not whatever. But, I'd rather have a teacher in a former Model C schools who's got conversational bigs kind of fluency in Setswana. Damn it! Just like I have conversational fluency in isiZulu and I cope fine. Okay, so it is okay. I can get into a meeting. And once on that, let me close on this environment. I mean, when you only are in Gauteng and you don't know what happens elsewhere, you think things happen. I have done some work with some departments in KwaZulu-Natal. KwaZulu-Natal is a very interesting province. You see, when you say people are proud of their African identity, KwaZulu-Natal. I'm on their WhatsApp groups. I've been to KwaZulu-Natal to do something. It's a professional strategy session for a week. In the room, it's mixed races, mixed genders, and whatever. The top person comes to speak, and they say something in English, they switch to Zulu, they go on, and nobody says, hey, I say, understanding. It's not I sit there and I'm thinking, and I understand Zulu, and I'm listening whether the person actually, when they switch to English, they repeat what they said in Zulu, and they don't, they're continuing. Not because they are not fluent in English, but because it's an environment that's bilingual, comfortably bilingual. And then go to University of Zululand. Note, I said University of Zululand, not KwaZulu-Natal. KwaZulu-Natal, of course, played a leading role in introducing isiZulu, that everybody must learn isiZulu. Thank you to Professor Makgoba. All his haters hated as much as they wanted, because he made it policy that every student who comes to KwaZulu must learn isiZulu. And people complained. And it was good because he's not Zulu, he's from Limpopo. Here you have a guy who's Pedi, and he says we are in KwaZulu-Natal, every student in this university must learn isiZulu. They fought and fought until the cows came home. It's policy, and it's happening, right? In University of Zululand, I'm told, go to maybe a classroom in the engineering faculty. It's very normal that the lecturer is teaching, and a student raises their hand to ask a question, and they ask. The language of learning and teaching is English, and everything is in English. The student asks the question in Zulu. The lecturer is from Guyana, can't understand, studied at UCT, knows a little bit of Xhosa, ask the other one, can you break it down for me? The other student breaks it down, the lecturer responds. And the lecturer tells me, Prof, I have to do that. And it works. And it's a comfort, but it's the same province. I'm on several WhatsApp groups, the KwaZulu-Natal WhatsApp group that I'm on. They will write stacks and stacks in isiZulu. And they're educated and they've got money. Not because they're bored or they don't understand the language. No. It's just the identity. They can argue. Big arguments taking place in clear Zulu. And I'm saying there's a certain identity, pride and whatever. We could do research as to what it does to other things. But I'm saying my message of with language comes power, with power comes access to mathematics and many other things remains. And the sooner we get to the party and stop finding problems and waiting for the scientific register to be in place before we do anything, the better. Thank you very much.
I understand there are gifts for plenary speakers are going to be handed out.